Hey everybody, good afternoon. Hope your day's going well so far. And I've got some thoughts about this huge game on Thursday night against the Rams that is coming up in just a couple of days. And obviously, I'm going to say what needs to be said in the pregame video when the time comes for me to make that, but there's more going on in this game that can be packed into one pregame video. So, I'm going to take this video to talk about an angle of this game that might give the Seahawks some kind of advantage if they are doing things in a cerebral and sensible way at the VMAC. And they need things like this because, frankly, I can admit it, the odds are stacked against you a little bit. You're underdogs in this game for a reason. You're usually not an underdog at home, but in this game you are. The Rams have looked better through 4 games. The Rams, I mean, they didn't win the division last year, but they made it further than you did last year. They they look good. They look like a genuine Super Bowl contender. Maybe not last week, but they look like a team that can compete for the Super Bowl if the right if the right boxes get checked in those January games. So I'm thinking about this game, and it makes me think about another game where the Seahawks played the Rams at home 4 years ago. And I can't help but place a lot of weight on this game. I'm looking at the box score for it right now on screen. You guys can see it. You guys probably remember this game. This was the game that really kind of ended that era in Seattle. Now, we were able to rebuild on the fly pretty effectively, but this was the game that kind of forced Carroll and Schneider to blow things up as much as they could without losing their quarterback. This game, if you guys don't remember, was pretty much for the division. If the Seahawks won this game, they would have had a really good chance to win the division. They would have owned the tiebreaker. They would have just needed to take care of business down the stretch. And at home, against a Rams team that was good, but would ultimately not win a playoff game this year, you go down 34-0 at halftime and lose 42-7. One of the biggest humiliations, probably the biggest humiliation of the Pete Carroll era. You didn't even show up. You may as well have just forfeited the game before you got there. It was ugly. And honestly, one thing I can say about Pete Carroll Seahawks teams is they avoided getting blown out pretty well over his tenure here. But this was probably the most decisive blowout he was ever a part of. And I can't help but think about this game when looking at a game like this. This was Sean McVay's first season as head coach in LA. And one of the bigger humiliations from this game was that you had a a kid like Sean McVay, who's slightly older than me, completely decimating a guy like Pete Carroll who has been around forever. That was one of the things that made it feel like the old dog is dead and the new guard is here. And I remember watching this game, and I wasn't even really mad because the game was over so quickly. There wasn't even time to get mad, really. But I remember thinking, what is the point of having a head coach with this much experience if he's just going to get his pants pulled down on TV by a rookie head coach? And I know Sean McVay was good, and he was obviously good at the time. But I remember thinking, what is the point of having Pete Carroll around if McVay's going to humiliate him like this? And ever since this game, it kind of feels like we've been kind of chasing the McVay thing. Carroll trying to figure out how to coach against the Sean McVay offense, and he made some progress last year because the Seahawks defense did a pretty good job against the Rams. Now, granted, the Rams upgraded their quarterback this offseason. Now they have a franchise quarterback. I'm not going to call him elite, but he's good. He's better than Goff, and it has changed the equation a little bit. So you had finally caught up to the McVay offense to the point where you could handle them with a lackluster QB, a below average QB like Goff. But as soon as you do that, now you got to catch up to them with an actually good quarterback, a quarterback who can be an asset like Stafford can be. So it still feels like you're chasing a little bit, even though I know you had success against them last year on defense. Held them to 9 points in a game that basically decided the division. You held them to basically 17 points in the playoff game. The rest was scored by the defense and special teams. And even that first game was not bad. So here we are with Carroll kind of chasing McVay. And given the fact that it's been 4 years since this game, when McVay really kind of forced us to blow things up, because I truly believe that Carroll would have kept everybody if not for this game. Even if we had lost a close game here, I think he would have been like, okay, we're close. Let's keep Tom Cable, keep Daryl Bevel, keep Chris Richard, keep Tom. I already said Tom Cable, but keep some of these players that we lost that offseason, like Sherman and well, not Earl, but we kind of lost Earl in the long run after that season. So I'm kind of looking at this as what can, after 4 years, it's been almost 4 years since this game, what have you done to catch up to Sean McVay? So one thing that's interesting about this game is that while I'm talking about McVay's offense versus Carroll's defense, one of the significant contributors to whether or not we can have success against the McVay offense might be our offensive coordinator. Shane Waldron is a McVay disciple, and he likes to do some of the same things that McVay does. And not only have we had that new McVay offense Waldron offense. I'm not going to call it the McVay offense. The Waldron offense in here for a month now. We also had it in training camp. We had it through preseason, OTAs, etc., etc. So we've had an opportunity to really look at that offense from a different perspective. We can now practice against it. And it kind of gets me thinking about one thing that drove me crazy about the Seahawks, particularly their head coach a couple years ago, that they are now finally starting to address. And I'm going to talk about another Seahawks-Rams game from a couple years ago, 2019 in LA. I think it was the last time we played in the Coliseum. They beat us 28-12, and it was a bad game by the Seahawks, right? They had a chance to really bury the Rams. They ended up getting buried anyway, but that was an opportunity to end the Rams season. We kind of got pushed around. We didn't score a touchdown on offense. Wilson kind of fell out of the MVP race after that game. It was a bad game. And one thing that I remember from that game is that Pete Carroll, in his post-game press conference, said that one thing the Rams are really good at that he struggles to deal with as a coach, coaching a defense, is motion, pre-snap motion. He said the Rams really like to use pre-snap motion, and he, as a defensive coach, struggles to deal with that. And I remember thinking a couple of things. But the main thing was, if your defense struggles against motion, then why don't you have your offense implement some motion? Why don't you have your offense, if you feel like that's something you're bad against, you would probably feel like it's something that other teams would be bad against. And I'm not even talking about all the stats that pretty strongly indicate teams are better when they use pre-snap motion. But if you personally, and I know that you think that you're a good defensive mind, have a hard time dealing with pre-snap motion, why wouldn't you want other defensive coaches to have to deal with your pre-snap motion? So if you take a look at some of the work by Seth Waldron on Twitter, another really nice Twitter find, you can see why I say that. So this is a chart made from the last month of 2019. So this chart basically captures data from the first 12 or 13 weeks of the 2019 regular season. And it's a little complicated and convoluted to read, but basically the teams that are far on the right of this chart are using pre-snap motion a lot. And the teams that are on the left are not using pre-snap motion hardly at all. Look at the Ravens all the way over here, by the way. Wow, okay. The Ravens only went 14-2 this year and got the 1 seed. So you can see that the Rams are one of the top 5 teams, I think, in using pre-snap motion, over 15%, about 17%. The Niners are not that far away, by the way. They're actually ahead. They're at about 18%. Food for thought. The Seahawks are about 8%. So teams in our division that have great offenses, that have young visionary head coaches, are using motion, and one of those teams, at the very least, gives Carroll fits with their pre-snap motion, and yet he doesn't want to use pre-snap motion in his own offense. It's below average. Most teams in the NFL are using pre-snap motion more than the Seahawks in 2019. And it didn't really change much in 2020. This is a little easier to read. This is also from Seth Waldron. He kept a percentage of how often teams were using pre-snap motion. And again, you can see the Ravens at the top, but the Rams and 49ers are second and third respectively. And the Rams over 27%. Niners over 25%. And the Seahawks, they did a little better. They were 13%, which was roughly average. They used pre-snap motion on a roughly average percentage of their snaps, just above 14th overall. And while that's a step in the right direction, and there are certainly teams that use pre-snap motion less, I mean, God, the Buccaneers with Jameis, this was the, no, this was the first Brady year, basically didn't use it at all. They still were effective. There are some other teams down here that had capable offenses that used very little pre-snap motion, but generally speaking, you're seeing the offenses that were the envy of the league be very, very adept at using pre-snap motion. So this year, so far, let's take a look at what we've got. So the Niners are at the top, and it's not even close. I mean, goddamn. The Rams are top 5 still, which you would expect. Seattle's top 10, and they're over 16%. So they're using some of that motion stuff more effectively and more often. So we're trending in the right direction on that front. Now, I think this is good news for the offense. I think it indicates that the process with this offense is good, even if the results are mixed. And I hope that this number goes up as the games go along. However, I'm also thinking about it from the other angle. Does this allow you to practice against pre-snap motion more? Does something like this allow you to see it more often in practice and thus defend against it? Now, as you can see, the Niners love pre-snap motion. We did okay against their offense, but they don't have a real quarterback, so I take that with a grain of salt. So this weekend's going to be a unique test. Not only will the pre-snap motion probably help our offense in the long run, because there's been plenty of studies done that indicate that pre-snap motion makes plays more effective, but I'm also interested to see if the ability to practice against an offense that is using some of those philosophies, a play caller and coordinator who subscribes to using those philosophies more than previous ones, is that going to help this defense prepare for a game like this? Let me know what you guys think down below. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I think that this is one of those things we can use to maybe gain an edge on Thursday. Excuse me. And if the Waldron hire pays dividends here, that's an additional value to bringing in somebody like him who learned under McVay and is probably trying to implement some of the stuff that McVay implemented in LA. Let me know what you think down below. I'm out of here. Go Hawks.